thanks for coming on. It's a real pleasure of ours. How are you keeping these days? You all good?
Yeah, I'm really well, thanks. Life's treated me pretty well. I haven't got anything to grumble about. So, yeah, bang on.
So great. So we've seen, the return of boxing. We've had obviously Eddie Hearn's back garden. We've got obviously BT have got a studio. What have you made of boxing being closed doors so far, Duke?
I think obviously it's a little bit sad for the fans because they obviously want to be there. Because you want to be part of the live action. But it is what it is. We've got to wait till this COVID-19 they get a cure for it, and then everybody goes back to being normal, But it's really sad for the fans.
Do you think this is the end, Duke, of maybe small hall shows as well? Do you think that's, that's taken a big hit, haven't they?
Yeah, it's taken a massive hit, and as long as this COVID-19, as long as they don't have a cure for it, the small hall shows, well, you know what, boxing as a whole will suffer, won't it?
Yeah.
Because there's not going to be any major shows. You can't imagine Anthony Joshua fighting, in Eddie Hearn's back garden. Do you see what I mean?
No.
Or Tyson Fury for that matter. So it's crippled the sport, hasn't it? Let's get it right.
Yeah, and the problem I think they're going to have now, like you said, obviously AJ Fury, I can't imagine they're both going to want to fight each other for peanuts. They're going to need the gate on it to generate the purses.
Sure, it kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? Really, but this is one of them things that it's out of everybody's hands. It's not like the promoters want it or the fighters want it. Sure, certainly, everybody just wants to get on, but we have to follow government guidelines because, again, we've got to get it right. People are dying from this illness. It's really not a joke. So, listen, let's just hope everybody, all the powers that be, can come up with a cure sooner rather than later. And then we can all just crack on and get back to doing what we all love to do. And that's either partake or be at and be a spectator and enjoy British boxing.
Definitely, mate.
Yeah, definitely agree, mate. Now, Duke, coming on to yourself, mate, we know you're still heavily involved with the sport that you love, and in particular on a day-to-day basis in your gym. Could you just talk to us a bit about how that started and sort of who you train and work with on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, well, I've always had a gym since I retired from the sport, as a lot of ex-boxers do. You look for something that you know and you love and you've got a passion for. So when I first retired from the sport of boxing, I went to with my older brother Clinton at his gym because he'd already started his gym in Herne Hill. And that was very successful for him. He's since moved down to a place called Dulwich now, Dulwich Hamlets football ground. And the chap does really well down there, Anyway, I've just sort of followed him. I've just followed him, really. I've just opened. So I've been working for myself for quite some time, probably about 20 odd years on and off. But I've had, this is my sort of third sort of venture, working or having my own gym. And I call it the Jukebox. And it's been a little bit of labour of love. Just finding the unit, getting it set up, kitted out, one thing and another. There's a lot of red tape you've got to cut through, where local councils are concerned, one thing and another. And then you've got to get people through the door, obviously, to make a living. But it's what I do, it's what I love, I've got a passion for it. We train like young kids from 7 and right through, it's just like a boxing training program. It's not boxercise, I don't even know what that is, but it's just a boxing training program that I put together. And it's a lot of fun and I love it.
Was it something that always throughout your career, you envisaged doing when you did hang the gloves up, mate? No,
not at all. I just fell into it. Like most boxers, when my career was over, you lost for a little while because I'd given 18 years of my entire adult life to boxing, and it's all I've ever known. And it's given me a really great life. It's given me a great start in life. I've met some amazing people. I've travelled the world. I've done everything and more that I could ever have dreamed of doing in boxing. So it was like a natural progression. Me being a boxing, I've never wanted to be a manager or a promoter. It's never really interested me. I don't know why. Maybe one day it will. Maybe one day I'll find somebody and it'll just be a natural progression of my life where I can move on and go, you know what? I've got all this wealth, all this knowledge, all this experience. I've got to do something with it. And at some point I will do something with it. But right now I'm just happy training everyday people like you guys that just love the sport of boxing, want to get fit, and I like to give people what I call the boxing experience. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, that's great stuff, mate.
So moving on to your, boxing career, where did it all begin? How come why boxing? How did that come about?
Yeah, well, my older brother Clinton, his best friend at school was a guy called Frankie Lucas, who was an amateur boxer, and he introduced Clinton to boxing. And Frankie was quite a successful amateur and professional. Frankie, I think, went to the Commonwealth Games for St Vincent. This is in about 1978, 77, 78, something like that. And he was best friends with Clinton, so he introduced my brother Clinton to boxing. So Clinton introduced Winston, my brother, because I've got a big family. I've got 5 brothers, 1 sister. And so he introduced Clinton, and Clinton introduced Winston, and then Winston introduced Dudley, and then it just snowballed down to me. I had 2 brothers in between that, but they wasn't interested in boxing. And then it just came down, hit me, and then that was it. I got drunk on it, and that was me ever since. It's just I don't even know why I stayed in it for as long as I did as an amateur. It's a well-documented fact. I have the worst amateur pedigree of any professional world champion boxer. I kid you not.
No way.
But, yeah, I did. As an amateur, I was rubbish. My brothers were highly successful, as I'm sure you're well aware. You know,
Yeah.
Clinton was in the 76 Olympic Games, but Sugar Ray Leonard. My brother Winston was an England international. Dudley was an all-time national schoolboy champion. Dudley was won 8 national titles back to back, year in, year out. Dudley was mustard in the amateurs. And then it was me, and then my career was the opposite of theirs. At one point, I'd lost like 17 fights back to back. I don't even, I look back now, I can't even comprehend. I can't recognise that person.
Why do you think that was, Duke? You know, why the amateurs didn't work out for you, but obviously the pros, you were immensely successful. Why? Can you put it down to anything?
Yeah, lack of dedication. I didn't really want to apply myself. You know what I love to do? I just like to take part. I'd be the guy that wore, because my brothers had like England t-shirts and they had all the badges, and so I'd like wear their t-shirt. Well, Dudley anyway. I'd nick his badges because Dudley had all the England badges, and I'd put them on my shorts and on my t-shirt and my vest, and I'd wear the tracksuit. And then as soon as the bell would go for a fight, I'd get found out straight away because I couldn't fight then. But it had nothing to do with the coaches that I had. I had tremendous coaches that got a lot of success, not only with my brothers, but also there was a lot of amateur boxers in our gyms that were national champions, like Frank Bruno was one. And so I can't really put my failings in the amateurs down to anybody other than myself. Not really. Dedication's got its part in anything you do, isn't it, really? I just wasn't dedicated. Because like I say, I used to get drunk just being around my brothers. The buzz was it was unbelievable for me. It was just, you know, when you're around success so much, as I was, and like I say, I didn't want to get hit because I was quite a coward then, and I still don't like getting hit, you know. But I just think I used to follow my brothers everywhere, and it was just that was enough for me because we was always going up and down the country to schoolboy finals in Blackpool. That was like a proper event for me because we never used to go on holiday or anything like that. So when my dad had finally allowed me to go, my coach, it was a guy called Tony Chapman, my first amateur coach. He was amazing. But he had to convince my dad just to let me go and watch my brothers box because my dad wouldn't let me, he didn't want me to fight. So, but Tony would come down my house and, you know, massage my dad's ego a little bit and convince my dad to let me go and at least watch my brothers box, which he did eventually. And like I say, going to Blackpool and standing at Butlins and watching my brother fight, like we'd be having like a pillow fight at 3 o'clock in the morning because we used to share, we used to share a chalet with another club. I think they were called the Crystal Palace. Yeah, I think they were Crystal Palace. There was a guy called Angelo Avella and Curvis Butler. They were in the finals as well. And we'd have like pillow fights at 3 o'clock in the morning and just do stupidness. It was crazy, but it's all part of the upbringing, all part of the learning, and all part of the understanding of the sport.
Yeah, of course, mate. Now, I want to ask you, Duke, most fighters and professionals always remember their professional debut. What about for you? I mean, can you remember much about it? Was it nerves, excitement, or even a bit of both for you?
Yeah, a mixture of both. I made my professional debut at Wembley Arena. I think Frank Bruno was actually topping the bill, and I boxed a kid called Charlie Brown, and he was as nervous as I was. And but there was a lot of expectation, I think, on me because I was I was coming off the back of my brothers. Do you see what I mean? Like my brother Clinton, he was British and European champion at the time, on the verge of a world title fight, certainly, and I was obviously expected just to follow in his footsteps. So yeah, I boxed Charlie Brown, and he was really nervous, and I sensed it and sniffed blood, and he sort of sensed I was nervous, but he didn't really capitalise on it. You know what I mean? He pretty much froze, and I'd only hit him with a couple of shots, and he folded like a stack of cards, and that was it. Really, it was all over.
How difficult do you personally think now, Duke, it is for a young amateur who is turning pro to make the right choices, you know, and to get it right with picking the right promoter, the right manager to guide their journey in the correct manner?
It's extremely difficult. I just think I got ridiculously lucky, and by that I mean because my brothers were so successful in the amateurs, they put me in a position where I could meet the best manager and a really great trainer, and I just, like I say, I was really lucky to get. I mean, Mickey Duff, who managed me throughout pretty much the whole of my career, he was like what Alex Ferguson is to the football world of Man United, but he was that to the boxing. There was nothing Mickey Duff didn't know about anybody, any place, any time, except for when I asked him to manage me, initially he turned me down. And I had to beg him for over a year, nearly. It was the best part of a year to actually manage me. And I became like a bit of a stalker because my brother, we found out where his office was at Wardour Street in the West End. And I had nothing on my hands except time because I was unemployed. So I had no money. I wasn't going to, get up in the morning, going to work, at a job or anything like that. So going to the West End of London for me was an event. I'm 19 years old. So I'm excited. So I used to get up every morning, go to the toilet, have a shave, and have a bit of breakfast. And by the time I put an appointment to go and see Mickey Duff, I was just filled with such excitement because I was going to the West End of London. And by the time I'd get there, my brother had it all written out for me, like the map and how to get there and directions. But I didn't know where I was going and what I was doing. And anyway, so we went up there, me and my brother Dudley, and I can remember about the first maybe 4 or 5 times I got to Mickey Duff's office. When I'd put an appointment on to see him, he wasn't there. And so I'd go down his office and I befriended all of his backroom staff. I didn't know what I was doing. I ended up making them cups of tea and talking to them. There's people like Archie Kessler and his secretary was Val, and Mike Barrett was his business partner. Terry Lawless was another business partner. Jarvis Estair. They was always up there, mooching around. And Eileen would always say to me, "Well, don't worry, Mickey will be here in a minute." But he was never really on his way. She used to be really nice to me, let me down very politely. But I used to just go up there just for the crack. It was just brilliant.
Oh, we did, mate. I noticed at your record, Duke, that you fought in America quite a lot, didn't you, early on in your career? I'm just thinking, was that, how did that come about? Was it daunting for a recently turned over pro?
Well, again, I'm like, I was a young kid, right? And I'm like wide-eyed, open-mouthed, and after I'd actually convinced Mickey Duff to sign me, because it was a real effort, because he would always say no, but in the nicest possible way. I don't know if promoters today are so forgiving or so nice or so kind, but Mickey he'd never just rubbish me. He did it once when I first asked him, and then after that, it was always like an excuse why he couldn't manage me. So when eventually, after he did manage me, which again was another fluke, I got really lucky because I'd been sparring at the Thomas à Becket with the British champion, a guy called Kelvin Smart, which Mickey Duff had arranged, by the way. And I'd accidentally fractured his cheekbone or broke his nose in sparring. It was a total fluke. If I tried it again, I could never have done it. But after this fluke accident happened, there was a phone call from Mickey Duff, and he said, "Duke," he said, "come and see me." He said, "I want to talk to you." So I went to his office at Wardour Street. He said, "There's a contract on my table." He said, "Sign it." And I never really looked back from there. So I had my first 2 fights. I had my first fight here at Wembley Arena. My second fight was at the Anglo-American Sporting Club in London. And then he took me on this whistle-stop tour of America. And we boxed. I've had probably one of the most privileged, it's the only way I can explain it, one of the most privileged careers of sort of like modern day boxers, because what Mickey Duff saw in me, I don't know. To this day, I don't know. But he saw something in me, and he nurtured me, and he guided me. But we went to like Vegas, Los Angeles, Reno, Atlantic City, just learning my trade. Miami, we went everywhere. New York, gosh, the people I met, the experiences that I've had, and like I say, I'll be forever grateful to him.
Many pillow fights at 3 o'clock in the morning in Las Vegas, Dick?
Sorry, say again?
Is it many pillow fights in Las Vegas at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Well, listen. By then, I'm dedicated, and I'm absolutely walking the line, because I'm mixing with guys like when I used to train when we was in Vegas, we used to train like downtown in a place called Johnny Tocco's gym downtown. Johnny Tocco was this larger than life character. It was like the little guy, in the Rocky films, Rocky's trainer.
Mickey.
Johnny Tocco was like this. Yeah, Johnny Tocco was like Mickey, and he had this gym. So there was guys like Edwin Rosario, Hector Camacho, Boza Edwards, John McGarvey, Mike McCallum. These guys were training on like a regular basis, and I was privileged to see these guys working out on a daily basis, and amongst others. And I learned so much just by visualization. Like, I was like a kid in a sweet shop. Like, I could go to the gym at like 10 a.m. in the morning, like, and Boza Edwards would walk in, and Boza would walk out, train for 3 or 4 hours. He'd walk out. Edwin Rosario would walk in. He'd walk out 3 or 4 hours later, and Hector Camacho would walk in. Camacho would walk out 3 or 4 hours. Mike McCallum would walk in. It lists Evander Holyfield would walk in. There was just so many guys. I was just privileged to see so many great athletes working, training, talking to. I can remember having a conversation with the late Pernell Whitaker once. I met him before he won even an Egg Cup. I was in Atlantic City one year at a weigh-in. I can't even remember the fight, but like, Sweet Pea was like buzzing around because everybody was just doing their thing. And I can remember having a really long conversation with him just about boxing and life and one thing or another. And it was a real eye-opener for me. And then I met people like Lou Duva and Donald Trump, Don King. Mickey Duff used to introduce me to people. And I was just, like I said, I was just to soak it all up. I was like a kid in a sweet shop. It was an amazing experience.
Yeah, sounds like it must have been, such surreal but special times, mate, definitely. Duke, I want to ask you, obviously, you had an outstanding career with the elite merits of being a 3-weight world champion, but also a British and a European champion as well. What personally for you, which achievement or victorious night stands out for you in your career, and why?
I would have to say becoming world champion probably for the second time. That probably surpasses the first achievement for me, because it was a fight I wasn't supposed to win, and none of the British press gave me not even a sniff at winning the championship. I was odds-on favourite to get beat, and but Mickey Duff had so much confidence in me, as did my brother Dudley, who said I'd beat Gabby Canizales, who had I think 55 fights with about 35 knockouts. He'd had more knockouts than I actually had fights. He was a former WBA champion. He'd knocked out Miguel Laura, who I refused to fight because our styles were too similar, and I just didn't believe I'd beat Laura, so I'd have to go to Miami and fight him. But Canizales went in there, took my place, went over there and destroyed him in 2 rounds. And I just happened to be awake one night. It was on a program called Screen Sport, which was it was like what Sky Sports is now, but it's just back in the sort of like 9. Anyway, I woke up one night and Screen Sport was on. I've turned the telly on and Gabby Canizales was on, and he just knocked out Miguel Laura. And as soon as the fight was over, I rang Mickey Duff. I said, Mickey, you never guess what I've just seen. And he said, Duke, he said to me, I'm watching the same thing. He said, and he put the phone down on me. And I thought, so I rang him back again. I said, Mickey, no. I said, you got to get me this fight. He said, Duke, I'm going to get you the fight. And he put the phone down on me. I never heard nothing for about 3 weeks. Then he rang me back and he said to me, Duke, I've made the fight. And I really thought he was joking. Anyway, he made the fight, the Gabby Canizales fight, and for the best part of 3 to 4 months, I never went out my front door unless I was going for a run in the morning, or I was going to the gym of an afternoon, I should say, sorry. And so when we get to the press conference, when the deal's been done, and Gabby Canizales has come over to the press conference, now bearing in mind, Mickey Duff got him over here, and he was really tight making the weight and one thing and another. And like Manny Stewart was his promoter stroke coach and one thing and another. And after rubbishing me and telling me, because I'd lost the flyweight world title and he didn't think I was very good and one thing and another, the only thing I could think to say to him was, if you've missed 1 day's training for the last 3 months, I said, I'll find you out. I said, if you've if you haven't done your run in the morning, I said, if you haven't been to the gym with an evening time, I said, if you've had sex, if you've had drinks, I said, if you haven't made weight, I said, I'll find you out. Because that's the only thing I could say with any real confidence, because I knew that there wasn't one day that I cheated. Do you see what I mean? Now, I've always considered myself to be just not a knockout specialist, just a pure boxer. And I really, really believed, I think if I tried to fight him, I think I'd have probably got knocked out. But my own mindset was, if I box this guy over the duration, 6, 8, 10, 12 rounds, if I just box him and I don't get drawn into a fight, he ain't going to get near me and he's not going to have a chance. Because I watched him on a video against Greg Richardson, who was an outstanding WBA bantamweight world champion. And Greg Richardson had outboxed him. Greg Richardson couldn't outfight him, but he outboxed him. And I'd always fancied myself as a bit of a boxer, not a fighter, like I say, or a knockout specialist. So I just boxed him. And I was running like 10 miles Monday to Friday every morning. I never missed a morning. I'd be in bed every evening, sometimes at 6 o'clock of an evening on a sunny day. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. So you lived the life to the full, mate, is it?
I lived life like an absolute Trojan warrior, and so it came as no surprise to me, my fitness levels, and all I knew was every time he stood still, because he was like a little Roberto Duran type character, flat-footed, lots of head movement, little feints, trying to chin me all the time in every round. But every time he moved, I just set myself and I just kept tattooing him with the jab. And every time he'd reset himself, I'd hit him again. And the beauty for me was I'd learnt now how not to load up on my punches. So doing the 12-round duration, looking busy, doing nothing, just throwing lots of shots, giving him plenty of angles, and just kept hitting him. But I say, provided I didn't stand still, I just knew I could beat him, and that's how the fight panned out. I don't know if you've ever watched it, but you might want to watch it at some time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Duke,
sorry, Scott. Duke, I just want to say as well now, since retiring, another venture that we've seen you into, we've enjoyed your analysis and commentary of boxing on ITV and I believe Box Nation as well, mate. Is that something that you always wanted to do, or did it take any training, or did it sort of come naturally to you?
It came quite naturally. I love to talk, as you can probably imagine, and yeah, boxing's my passion. Boxing's what I love, and I think if you've got a passion about anything, you can talk about it till you're blue in the face. It doesn't mean you always make sense, but at least you can give some kind of insight. Even as a former 3-weight world champion, I still don't consider myself an expert, but I think I am maybe like a voice of reason that people might want to listen to, because it's what I've done, and I can identify when somebody's on top or when they're not, and I can also identify if different things that Joe Schmo, your general sort of public might not see in a fight. So I love the sport of boxing. It's something that I'll probably be involved with one way or another until the day I die.
Oh, wicked, mate.
Yeah.
Is there a particular fight, Duke, that sticks out to you as maybe a favourite that you commentated on?
Is a favourite?
Yeah.
My favourite fight that I've ever commentated on would have to be Joe Calzaghe, Jeff Lacey, because a lot of British press had written Calzaghe off, right? And
so it's quite similar to you against in your fight where you won the world title for the second time, yeah.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, that's how I'd likened it in my own mind, because I've seen Calzaghe fight many times prior to the Lacey fight. And if you look at Joe Calzaghe's style, Joe Calzaghe's what I call, he's such a good boxer. I don't know if he's actually given credit for that, being a boxer, but Calzaghe's work ethic, people say, he slaps a lot on one to another, but if you look at what he does, he grinds out victories. He does, he's just ground out victories. He's prepared to put in the work from the first belt to the last. Now, like I say, if you look at his work ethic, if you hit Calzaghe with 2 shots, he's going to hit you with 5. If you throw 5, he's going to throw 10. So he's prepared to put in a shift and outwork you, and I like that about him. So, and that's exactly what I was prepared to do when I boxed Canizales. I was just prepared to put in a shift. If he hit me once, I was going to hit him 4 times. My jab was the key, and Calzaghe was a good all-rounder. So in terms of pure excitement and, like I say, the underdog sort of coming to life, I love Calzaghe for that one reason only. I mean, he ruined Jeff Lacey that night. Lacey was never the same. He absolutely destroyed him, and he worked his backside off. And that's how he's ground out the victory. So that's got to be my most exciting fight I think I've commentated on. I've done some really big fights. I've been really, really lucky, and I think atmospherically, the biggest fight I've ever done was Tyson against Lennox Lewis, because that was it was horrible. I mean, the atmosphere was just so, you could cut the atmosphere with a knife, because the anticipation of Mike Tyson, you know, going head to head against Lennox Lewis. I'd love to have seen Tyson in his prime against the prime Lennox Lewis. We didn't get a prime Tyson on that night. We didn't. But when I promise you, Mike Tyson took a beating on that night. If you watch the fight again, I think in about the 5th or the 6th round, when Tyson gets decked with a big heavy right hand from Lennox Lewis, and he goes back to his corner, and his head's down before he gets to the corner, he's like that. And Ronnie Shields just lifts his head and he says to him, "Come on, man, you've got to give me some more." And Tyson looks him in the eye and he says, because I was really close, I was ringside that night working for 5 Live. Ronnie Shields lifts his head and Tyson just says to him, he says, "I can't." Now that for me was pitiful. I felt so sorry for him, but like the man that he is, he just got up and he went out for the next round, and he took a beating in that fight. It was horrible.
Yeah, he did. Do you think personally there may have been a different outcome of the fight had it been prime for prime, shall we say?
Listen, the Mike Tyson that destroyed like Michael Spinks, Trevor Berbick, you know, those guys. The list is endless. He was a machine. I'd love to see Tyson in his prime, you know, without all the madness and everything else that the chaos.
A 1980s version of Mike Tyson.
Sorry?
A 1980s version of Mike Tyson.
Yeah, a 1980s version of Tyson. I would love to see him against a prime Lennox Lewis, because I think the story would have been different.
Yeah, I agree. Now, Duke, something I want to ask you about as well, which I think is really important to mention, is you're an ambassador for the Mind charity as well, which I'm sure is something you're very proud of being involved with and representing. As blokes in particular, we find it difficult to speak up in more difficult times, shall we say. And, you know, I just want to get your thoughts. How important, Duke, do you think it is that we talk about how we are feeling and check in on, say, you know, family and friends and accept that sometimes it's okay to not feel okay, you know, mate?
Well, you know, I mean, boxers are a very strange breed of person, because to the public, we're like Superman. They think we're untouchable, and we don't have feelings and emotions and one thing or another. But, you know, we're the same as anybody else. Do you see what I mean? If my wife goes out, if my wife goes out of a night time, it gets to 10 o'clock and she's not back, and I start looking at the watch and I start getting worried and a bit anxious. And you know, she's perfectly safe. But like the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, boxers are only human at the end of the day. And my involvement with the Mind organisation came about many, many years ago, over maybe about 15 years now, maybe a little bit longer. But I had one of their advocates working in my gym, a guy called Michel Tizzy. He worked at Mind, a French guy. I called him the French assassin. Lovely guy. And he worked at Mind, and he'd been in and out of my gym working with me for over a year or two. And he'd seen how I sort of interacted with people. As I said before, I love talking to people. I love finding out what makes people tick. I never pry into people's private lives. I'm like a hairdresser, because people, the more I engage people, the more people want to talk to me for whatever their reason. And he'd seen me do this, and then he said to me, "Would you be interested in working with people with mental health problems?" So, you know, it was something I'd never done before, but I just figured, well, if it's like a talking therapy, then I've got half a chance. So I did, and I went to meet the top boy there, a guy called Paul Farmer, and Richard Pacitti at Mind of Croydon, and they introduced me to a group of people, the loveliest people I've ever met. And in actual fact, I've got one of my original members from 15 years ago still in my gym today, and I call her Blondie. That's not her real name. I call her Blondie 501. She's like the original. She's still in my gym today. In actual fact, she's coming to the gym tomorrow morning for a 7 a.m. session. So I know that what I've done to a degree is successful, because I've been only a small part in her, you know, just leading a normal life again.
Oh, that's great, mate.
Wicked, mate. I've got to ask, Duke. One of one of the highlights, I think, of your punditry for me was Groves Eubank when Naz was telling Eubank he had to hang the gloves up. What were you thinking at the time when Naz has gone off, and when I could see he was trying to be the voice of reason, as you said earlier?
Yeah, just, listen, I love Naz because he's so controversial. You see, where I suppose I think about what I'm going to say, but Naz just says the first thing that comes into his head. So
yeah.
It wasn't. I don't think it was anything personal because there's a little bit of history between him and obviously the Eubanks. But I think he generally just what he said. He genuinely meant he didn't want Eubanks to get hurt. Now, obviously, Eubank has improved marginally since that fight because he's beaten James DeGale, but there's nobody's heard of him since. But I mean, like I say, Naz is Naz at the end of the day. And he will always say what he thinks because he's not going to bow to anybody, and he'll just speak the first thing that comes into his head. But I think you have to be a lot more sort of diplomatic when you're on camera, and you can't just say the first thing that comes into your head. That's why you're an analyst. You're supposed to be able to analyse him while you're watching, and then make people understand that who's winning the fight, why they're winning, and then what the other guy's got to do to get back into the fight. And if you can break it down like that, then it makes more sense. Rather than just saying, well, I think you should retire. I think you should just quit. He went off on a bit of a tangent. But listen, it makes for great television, I think. And we should be a bit of a double act, I think, me and him.
He's one hell of a character, isn't he, old Naz?
Yeah, he's a lovely guy. I think he's the Naz that I know, certainly. Anyways, he's certainly matured a lot. And he's a proper man now, isn't he? Do you know what I mean? He's not this flash cocky. Don't forget he was a product. He had a product to sell, and he'd done it in such a way. And again, he was quite a phenomenal athlete. And the reason I say that was the guy's 5'6", but what he did. I boxed a guy called Steve Robinson for the WBO Featherweight World Championship. So again, I'm speaking from experience now. Steve Robinson was so physically strong. And that was my fourth move up in weight. But he outstrengthed me quite comfortably. What Nazim Hamed did to him on that night, Robinson was never quite the same. And Hamed he ruined him. It was quite sad.
Naz was certainly one who was very, very special back in the day. Now, Duke, I just want to say, mate, on behalf of myself and Scott and Southwest Boxing Media, thank you for giving up your time and speaking to us today, mate. It's been a pleasure.
You're more than welcome, fellas. I really appreciate you taking the time to ask me. So, I'll come back again if you ask me to. It's not a problem.
Definitely.
We'd love that, mate.
We'll have a catch up again soon, Duke. Thanks very much for your time, mate.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Wish you all the best. Take care, Duke.